Welcome back, dearies. I'm so glad you've come to class today. And that's because I will deliver information that is of great benefit to you. As you know, in the last 4 video tutorials, we've been addressing polycystic ovary syndrome, more commonly known as PCOS. So far, I've taught you that polycystic ovary syndrome is a 3-organ system disease caused by 3 separate hormone abnormalities with specific but inadequate diagnostic criteria requiring 3 separate arms of treatment. None of what I've taught you thus far has been specific to menopause. But today, all of what I teach you will be specific to menopause. This is video number 459, and it addresses the effect of PCOS on your menopause. Now, this is a very, very important video, partly because I do not address PCOS in my book at all. And partly because even though PCOS has many manifestations that are recognizable before you become postmenopausal, the most significant and deadly ones manifest after you become postmenopausal. And you will see that overall, the big underlying theme to how PCOS affects your menopause falls into the mantra of pay now or pay later. And the cost is greater if you pay later. In other words, the earlier in your life you adequately and completely manage your PCOS, the better off you'll be once you reach postmenopause. I guess you could say the sooner the better and the later the regretter. And I know that regretter isn't really a word, but I've been known to make up words, and this is one of them. So in this video, I will explain why this is the case. In videos 455 through 458, I've walked you through PCOS in terms of how it presents over the course of your entire reproductive life. In videos 455, 456, and 457, I sequentially created this chart that should already be familiar to you if you're watching these videos in order. It's really a summary of those 3 videos, but you won't understand it unless you've watched the videos. Then, in video number 458, I presented the management and treatment options for PCOS. Here's the chart I created for that tutorial. Now, if I combine these charts to reflect management and treatment of PCOS for each organ system, we get this. I know the font is teeny tiny, but I had to make it so in order to fit everything on the chart. But again, if you're watching my videos in order, none of this is new to you. Well, one of the most important things I've told you about PCOS is that there are many management options for the symptoms of PCOS that cannot actually treat the underlying PCOS. And this, along with the timing of your management, are the things that will have the greatest impact on your menopause. So the earlier you manage your PCOS, the better your postmenopause. You see, estrogen was your body's fountain of youth. When you lose your estrogen at postmenopause, you start aging on the inside and on the outside. But with PCOS, all the inside aging is much more profound. And that's because the long-term effects of PCOS tend to be diseases of aging. And if you have aging due to postmenopause, in addition to aging due to PCOS, you will not age well at all. Take a look at the list of metabolic symptoms that are typical of PCOS. Diabetes type 2, abnormal cardiac lipids, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, increased risk of heart attack, obesity, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Do you see the overlap with aging? Well, if you have PCOS and you don't treat your PCOS properly, all of these diseases begin early in your reproductive life. So by the time you reach postmenopause, they're already advanced. And that's why you need this video entitled, The Effect of PCOS on Your Menopause. Like I said, the earlier the better, and the later the regretter. Pay now or pay later. So what I want to do today is go through the PCOS timeline chart and explain the effect of each phase on your menopause. And I'll explain why the effect of each depends on your management of each. I'll also explain why it adds up to pay now or pay later. So let's start with puberty. Here's just that portion of our chart. The PCOS manifestations of puberty are mostly cosmetic. They include hirsutism and acne. These things, in and of themselves, do not have either a direct or an indirect effect on your menopause. And notice that they are both due to too much testosterone. More importantly, notice that the excessive testosterone is produced by your ovaries. Well, you already know that your ovaries go out of business and stop producing hormones at postmenopause. And that means they stop producing testosterone too. But unfortunately, for most women with PCOS, the lifelong effects of high testosterone have already taken quite a toll by the time they reach postmenopause. Many of them have significant emotional trauma from the hirsutism and the acne. And many already have severe male pattern hair loss. If they have not taken measures to actually treat the high testosterone early in life, they will probably suffer the effects of it for the rest of their lives. So, even as early as puberty, you can see why this is a matter of the sooner the better. At puberty, you also start having irregular, unpredictable, infrequent, or absent periods. But I'm going to discuss that in the reproductive phase, which is next. So here's the reproductive portion of our chart in isolation. The PCOS manifestations of your reproductive life include irregular, unpredictable, infrequent, or absent periods, infertility, and multiple ovarian cysts on pelvic ultrasound. Of course, all of these are really the result of just one thing, high luteinizing hormone, or LH, from your brain. And while these seem like issues related solely to your inability to get pregnant, they are really a whole lot more than that. Why? Because infrequent periods and infertility will become moot at postmenopause, but the multiple ovarian cysts on pelvic ultrasound will remain. And as I taught you in the unit on ovarian cancer, all ovarian cysts in postmenopause are cancer until proven otherwise. I mean, if your ovaries are already like this, how in the world will you know if you develop ovarian cysts or swellings that are due to cancer? So the very fact that you have ovaries full of ovarian cysts when you become postmenopausal puts you at very high risk of missing a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. This is yet another example of the pay now or pay later phenomenon. The other reason these reproductive manifestations are not merely a matter of your reproductive life is because all the metabolic abnormalities are already present. take a look at the isolated reproductive section of our chart again. See the gray box in the metabolic column? Diabetes type 2, abnormal cardiac lipids, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, increased risk of heart attack, obesity, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease are all brewing already. So the reproductive phase involves much more than just reproductive issues. This is the most important contributor to the principle of pay now or pay later. This is the underlying reason that the cost is greater if you pay later. Okay, so the next phase is pregnancy. Now you're probably thinking, pregnancy? What in the world does that have to do with postmenopause? Well, when it comes to PCOS, it has a lot to do with postmenopause. Let's look at an isolated section of pregnancy on our chart. Notice that once you're pregnant, all the focus turns to the actual pregnancy. And despite the fact that your pregnancy complications are really a manifestation of the underlying PCOS, they are not managed as such. The most common pregnancy complications are gestational diabetes and gestational hypertension. But wait! These are ultimately metabolic abnormalities. And if you have them during pregnancy, you are at much higher risk of having them at postmenopause. So, just like you saw with the reproductive problems, all those metabolic abnormalities brew throughout your pregnancy, and they become even more aggressive afterward. Do you see why you need to understand the effect of PCOS on your menopause? Now, moving on to perimenopause. Here's the perimenopause portion of our chart in isolation. At perimenopause, the most obvious symptom is abnormal uterine bleeding. But why? Well, it's because of your lifelong high LH, which has resulted in low progesterone way down here, which has resulted in an extra thick endometrial uterine lining. But the real problem is that it all adds up to a very high risk of endometrial uterine cancer. And that may not be evident until postmenopause. But by that time, it's been developing unnoticed for years. This is why taking estrogen plus progestin, monophasic continuous birth control is such a great benefit. And the longer you take them, the better. And the cutoff age, according to guidelines, is 55. And once again, those pesky metabolic abnormalities that have been present since your early reproductive life are even more of a threat now. This is where you really start to realize that the earlier you adequately manage your PCOS, the better. And the later you adequately manage your PCOS, the regretter. Well, ultimately, you get to postmenopause. Here's that portion of our chart in isolation. Now you see the cumulative effect of all the phases that have come before. You still have the symptoms that were due to high testosterone, along with the risks of having had high LH all your life. So you're already at very high risk of endometrial uterine cancer. Plus, you have all the metabolic abnormalities that are also diseases of aging. This is why it is so critically important to manage each of these phases successfully. If you choose management options that do not treat the underlying PCOS, you will have much more severe manifestations of the metabolic abnormalities at postmenopause. The sooner the better, and the later the regretter. Pay now or pay later. Now, how do you manage your menopause itself if you have PCOS? Does your PCOS affect your management options? Well, the answer is both yes and no. PCOS does not change your management options at all in terms of what you can do to manage your menopause. But it does make it such that some management options are much better for you than others. So now I want to delineate some of the keys to successful menopause management if you have PCOS. First, if you choose any kind of hormone replacement at all, you need to be absolutely sure that you avoid all testosterone. This is because one of the underlying causes of PCOS is high testosterone. And even though your high testosterone was produced by your ovaries, the negative consequences of it stay with you for the rest of your life. The last thing you want is more of it. Second, if you still have your uterus, you definitely need both estrogen and progestogen rather than progestogen alone at all stages of your menopause management. Never, ever use any progestogen-only option. This is because with PCOS, your luteinizing hormone level is the problem, not your progesterone level. A progestogen-only option will not sufficiently replace your hormones. And this is because it will not address the underlying source of your hormonal imbalance or absence. Third, if you do not still have your uterus or your endometrial uterine lining, you can take estrogen replacement all by itself without progestogen. And that's really a better scenario for you all around. If you have PCOS, your lifelong excessive testosterone levels have made it such that you have always needed more estrogen. So omitting estrogen now when it's lower than ever before would be a huge faux pas. Fourth, if you have PCOS, you really do need to seriously consider using hormone replacement therapy for your menopause. It is the only management option that can possibly target your PCOS. You will not be better off doing nothing or avoiding HRT. You will only be making your PCOS worse, as well as all the metabolic problems that come along with it. And if you're younger than age 55, your very best hormonal replacement option is estrogen plus progestin monophasic continuous birth control. At 55, you should just switch to HRT made specifically for menopause. Fifth, if you have polycystic ovaries at the time of your postmenopause, you need to seriously consider having a total hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo oophorectomy. This means removal of your uterus, cervix, both fallopian tubes, and both ovaries. This is because all ovarian enlargements at postmenopause are cancer until proven otherwise. And there is no way you will diagnose another problem if your ovaries are already enlarged with a bunch of cysts from PCOS. And it would be foolish to keep your uterus when you have a sky-high risk of endometrial uterine cancer anyway. Sixth, if you are obese, this is when weight loss becomes a life-saving matter. It will be more difficult to lose weight, but it will be more critical to lose weight. Seventh, regardless of your weight, you definitely need to employ all the diet and lifestyle measures appropriate for all the diseases of aging that are characteristic of PCOS. This is the most difficult achievement for most women. It's difficult for most people, period. And with PCOS, it's something that you've always needed, but most likely avoided. This is yet another reason I say pay now or pay later. So, PCOS makes management of your menopause more critical, not less critical. Just because your periods stop does not mean your PCOS stops. And in many ways, if you mismanage your menopause, you make your PCOS even worse. The summary is that every phase of PCOS, at every stage of your reproductive life, has an impact on your postmenopausal life. The more adequately you manage all the preceding phases, the less of an impact they will have on your postmenopause. And the more inadequately you manage all the preceding phases, the more of an impact they will have on your postmenopause. So there you have it. I commonly encounter women who have a very short-sighted view of PCOS. They think it's only pertinent to reproduction. And unfortunately, they usually make a lot of mistakes in managing it simply because they don't understand the big picture. Many times their doctors know better than they are at viewing it in its totality. My goal is always to ensure that you have the whole truth and the whole story. That way you do not make mistakes that you could have avoided. And next week, I'll present the most common PCOS management mistakes. If you or your daughter has anything that could possibly be PCOS, please, please, please schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me. It is never too early to learn about it, and it is never too late to learn about it. It's also never too early or too late to subscribe to this channel and my newsletter. And social media is an option at any time, early or late. Come back in a week, my dear students, and I will see you then. Bye for now.